Welcome back everybody. I hope you've been following along. As you know, we have a step-by-step process for how you form collaborations with federal laboratories or other technology commercializers. What I'd like to do today is I'd like to talk about the managed part of the relationship. So far we've talked about how do you get SBIR money, STTR money. We've talked about the alliance framework, which is a rigorous structured approach for doing a deal. We've talked about how do you allocate intellectual property rights in these agreements, what financial modeling looks like for these agreements. We've had the folks from Brookhaven National Laboratory talk a little bit about what is the best approach to a national laboratory? How do you deal with these folks? So the good news is you have a deal. Yay, we signed a deal. I have bad news. When you sign a deal, no value's been created. What really happens is you have a signed piece of paper. The next trick is to manage the relationship to success, and that's what I'd like to talk about now. So, I'm about to introduce you to a set of tools called the Alliance Implementation Program. These tools are designed to allow busy executives who do not have PhDs in management to coordinate and integrate the resources of two companies across organizational boundaries. How did these tools come about? Well, I've been doing this for about 25 years, and you think about when people call up someone like me. Here's the call I get. Slowinski! Slowinski! Get down here, another one went south. Well, after going to 30 of the sickest alliances you ever saw in your life, I sat down and said, you know, what are the common themes? What makes a sick alliance sick? And then what I did was I spent some time with very interesting people to understand how do you deal with these particular management issues. There's 12 tools. I will go through 6 of them. The other 6 you can find in the literature that we're going to be providing on the site. What's the good news? What's the bad news? The good news is either you or your partner probably has some pretty sophisticated project management skills. And I want you to know that those skills are absolutely necessary for what we're about to do. The bad news is they may be necessary, but they are not sufficient. The tools that I'm going to introduce you to don't deal with sufficiency in any mathematical way, but from a management perspective, these are the tools that complement your project management skills. So what you're really doing is you're applying the tools that we're about to learn today to your project management skills, and hopefully that's going to be enough to allow you to have a very smooth working relationship with your partner. Now, these tools are widely adopted in the pharmaceutical industry. For those of you who have pharmaceutical experience, you will have seen some of them. They're adaptable to any industry, and they're being used widely now in particularly electronics, consumer products, specialty chemical. So the tools are broken out into sort of 2 subsets. The first subset is for coordinating and integrating resources across organizational boundaries. That's these tools here, the 6 ones here. The next 6 tools are designed to help you overcome conflict. Before I get into the tools, I'd like to share with you my philosophy, my experience of 25 years. And that is that tools like the ones you're about to see can only be used at a specific period of time. Think about your day. You have a desk full of stuff, you've got a laboratory worth of work to do, and all of a sudden somebody shows up at your door and says, hey, I'm here to help you manage your alliance. And the answer is, how do I get this guy out of my office? But there are specific points in time where people like you and people like me are receptive to help. And these tools are best used at those times. And I'm going to show you exactly the times when to use the tools, and I would encourage you not to use them at other times. People have got a full plate of things to do. They do not have time to stop what they're doing to implement alliance management tools, right? Okay, next. The other nice thing about these tools, particularly the ones designed for coordinating and integrating resources across boundaries, is they translate the alliance agreement, which tends to be between institutions, into the goals, objectives, and the tasks that the individuals have to perform. So that's one of the values of these tools, is that the individual people, the people at the bench, have the opportunity to understand in a very clear way what the deal says and what their roles and responsibilities are. And then finally, I'd like you to know that failure, implementation failure, is often built into the contract. One of the reasons that we showed you the Alliance framework, and one of the reasons that I'm such a believer in that wonderful process, is that it minimizes the chances that you're going to miss something important. It can't eliminate it, that's not possible in my world, but the Alliance framework minimizes the chances you're going to miss something important. And if you haven't seen the Alliance framework presentation, I would encourage you to go back and to take a look at that one. Enough said. So, I mentioned to you that there are specific points in time where these tools have the most impact. Let me introduce you to the points in time. The first one is at the kickoff meeting. Most experienced Alliance managers at the kickoff bring both firms' implementers into the same room at the same time. It's a kickoff meeting. We're going to talk about a 2-day meeting because there are things that need to be done, and those things are probably going to take you 2 days. There are specific actions to take during those meetings that go beyond the normal agendas for those meetings, but are designed to help you implement the Alliance. That's what we're going to be talking about now. The second point of time is at quarterly meetings. How do you ensure that both sides achieve the most value in their quarterly meetings? And then finally, there's going to be site visits, but we'll talk about that in just a little while. So let's start with the kickoff meeting on day 1. These are the tools I encourage you to use during day 1 of the kickoff meeting. I'm going to start with the business development presentation. Here's the issue. The poor Gene Slowinski's sitting at the bench. How do we learn about the Alliance? How do I learn about what I'm supposed to do? Did I read the contract? Probably not. And by the way, it probably wouldn't help me very much. Contracts tend to be written in very legal language, and they are written for the relationship between the institutions. They really don't describe at a detailed level what the individual is supposed to be doing. So that doesn't help very much. What usually happens is my first-line supervisor comes down and he says to me, "Hey, Slowinski, guess what? We just did an alliance with Company X or Federal Laboratory Y. Here's what you're supposed to do." Well, I'm a very bright person, and you can see this oval here. If that oval says I get it 100% right, the little line says I got it about 80% right. Well, I'm quite the poet. I'm a very innovative person. I'll make up the next 20%. I'll make up the last 20%. I know how you should have written this deal. That's my 20%. Let's say you're my counterpart in Company B or Federal Laboratory B. You're also a smart person. You get it 80% right. You just got a different 80%. And that's the problem with alliances. If every implementer, the poor people sitting at the bench, gets it 80% right, but they all get a different 80%, the alliance starts off on day 1 with everybody rowing their little hearts out in a slightly different direction. And it becomes a nightmare very quickly. But people are trying to be nice to one another, so they smile while the conflict brews. What we want to do is avoid that at all costs. And that's the business development presentation. What do I mean? The negotiators from your company and the Federal Laboratory or your other commercialization partner stand in front of the room. All of the implementers are in the room from both organizations, and they describe what's in the contract in New Jersey English. That's right, very clear business language, not legalese, because I want every single implementer to know what's in the contract and what's not in the contract. And in fact, the presentation doesn't end until every implementer has had the opportunity to ask his or her question. One of the key issues that you're going to describe is intellectual property disclosure rules. And that's the second tool I'd like to talk about. So here's the issue. If we did not have the joint negotiators presentation, your scientist walks up to me and says, "Slowinski, tell me everything you know about trade secret number 27. What? I didn't even know you knew about trade secret number 27. What has my organization trained me to do when anybody asks me about any kind of trade secret? That's exactly right. I say nothing. And in fact, I may turn and walk away, and I may even start running away. And what that means is on our first day, you look at me and say, that Slowinski is not very collaborative. He's certainly not cooperative. And in fact, Slowinski is kind of a jerk. And that's the way we start off the relationship. So, IP sharing rules. Here's how it works. After the business development presentation, you take your technical people into one room, I take my technical people into another room, and we discuss the following issues. Which intellectual assets must I share with the partner? Slowinski, tell them everything about trade secret number 27. Must never share with the partner. Do not say a word about trade secret number 28. And in fact, how will we, our company, protect your proprietary intellectual assets as they sit inside our shop? You see, you're going to provide us with some very confidential information. You need to be assured that we protect your confidential information at least the same level you protect your confidential information. And so that's one of the discussions we're going to have. I want to make sure that my technical folk understand what's being disclosed, what they have received, and how they will protect it. Let me share with you another tool that really works well when you use it on the first day of the kickoff meeting. It's called linking decision-making structures. Here's the issue. Inside your organization, you have a decision-making structure. It works great. Inside my organization, I have a decision-making structure. It works great. The only thing I can assure you is that they don't look a thing alike. And that leads to conflict, right? Slowinski, I need your budget numbers because our budget's due next week. And my response is, my budget's not due for 3 months. I'll give you the numbers in 3 months. That doesn't help you very much. And that's the kind of problem that we want to resolve very early, like during the kickoff meeting. So here's this funny little chart we've put together. What I would encourage you to do is sit with your counterpart. You're going to find you have a counterpart. Sit with your counterpart, and both of you answer the following questions. Number one, what are the key decisions you and I have to make during the next 90 days? Let's just start with 90 days. And you may have one decision, you may have 2 decisions, 4 decisions, some number. Write them down. Next, who's the key person inside my company that makes that decision? Next column, what's the formal decision-making structure? Well, we use stage gates in my company. What's the informal decision-making structure? Harry makes that decision. And then what's timed decision? You see, in your company, if it takes a week to make a decision, but that same decision takes 6 weeks in mine, I need to warn you about that now. You need to be prepared. What can you and I do to drop the cycle time inside my company so that we can make the decision and move forward? Pilot this funny little chart on your next alliance and see if it doesn't solve some of the problems that you've been facing. Now, I do want to talk about conflict. I want to talk about how do you deal with conflict. And I'd like you to know that there's 2 types of conflict. There's positive and there's negative. Conflict's not a bad thing. If conflict allows you to surface issues that are causing trouble inside the relationship and allow people to view those issues rationally and resolve the issues, that's very positive conflict. There are other forms of conflict that are not positive. And so what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to bias your relationship toward positive conflict and away from negative conflict. Before we talk about conflict, I'd like to tell you a little bit about how I learned about this. I mentioned that I've worked with some very interesting people to learn about these tools, to help develop these tools. When I first decided to start learning about conflict, I did read quite a bit about it, but the law school's right across the street from my office at Rutgers. So I went to the law school. I stopped the first lawyer I saw. I said, "How do you deal with conflict?" And it was a very interesting discussion. The lawyer said, well, basically we're good at dealing with conflict, but we have pretty blunt instruments. Arbitration, mediation, litigation. Those are pretty blunt. the point that he made, which really resonated with me, is that many of the conflicts that get to a legal status could have and should have been resolved long before. They could have and should have been resolved much lower in the management structure of the organization. But the management structure didn't know how to resolve them, so now it's up to me, the lawyer. That discussion led me to my next adventure in Rutgers University. What group do you think I went to next? And remember, I believe that alliances are not just relationships between institutions, they're relationships between individuals. So who do you think I went to next? That's right, the psychology department. What kind of psychologist? No, I didn't go to see the abnormal psychologist. No, I did not. I went to see the marriage counselors. And I'm going to tell you something. Fire all your high-priced consultants. Hire a corporate marriage counselor. They are the solution. It was wonderful. It was absolutely wonderful. So the marriage counselor that I talked to shared with me some of these thoughts. First of all, you have to understand the anatomy of an alliance in order to understand how to resolve conflict. So in this slide, as you will see, during the early days, really during the join-up session, the communication structure between the two organizations is that big, black, heavy line. Let me share with you the anatomy of an alliance. First of all, Company A, the big box in Company A, those little boxes inside the big box, they represent groups that will provide critical resources at critical times, right? So one will be your technology group, another one might be your marketing group, one might be your legal, whatever it is. You fill in who those boxes are. The circle there, the little pie chart there, represents the cross-functional team inside each company. During the early days of the alliance, particularly during the join-up session, the communication structure between the two firms is represented by that big, heavy double arrow in the center. The communication structure is really between the two cross-functional teams. That's at the beginning of the join-up session. By the end of the join-up session, a second communication structure has emerged, and it overlays the first. So the first one's still there, but the second one emerges and sits on top of the first. What happens is the key people inside Company A identify their counterpart in Company B. I'll call them a functional pair. So the chief scientist in Company A will identify and form a pair with the chief scientist in Company B. The different functions inside each organization will identify their counterparts and they form a functional pair. The secret of alliances is that the health of the relationship resides in the health of the functional pairs. That's what the marriage counselor told me. Anything I can do to keep the health of those functional pairs high pays enormous benefits when you're managing the alliance. So what I want to do is I want to share with you the marriage counselor's view of how you keep the health of the functional pairs high. This funny little worksheet is called expectation mapping. And marriage counselors are wonderful. She said to me, well, Slowinski, when you have a successful marriage, the expectations of the husband and the expectations of the wife tend to map. As the expectations diverge, the marriage gets less and less healthy, and there comes a point where the expectations are just so far apart that the best thing I can do as a marriage counselor is to help this couple split apart without the help of 500 lawyers. Let's apply that to alliances. Here's the expectation mapping worksheet. I'm going to fill this out. I'm going to describe my view of me. I'm going to tell you what tasks I'm expected to perform. I'm going to tell you with what priority. I'm going to tell you which tasks I expect you to do collaboratively with me. In the white space there, I'm going to also give you some more information. I'm going to tell you my roles, my responsibilities, and my accountability inside my own organization. And that becomes important because you may have the title of vice president and you're a real vice president. I have the title of vice president too, but I'm like a vice president of a bank, right? Every place you look, there's a vice president in the bank. So, what tasks I'm going to do, with what priority, which ones are done cooperatively with you, and then my roles, responsibilities, and accountabilities inside my own organization. I'm going to fill out that form. I'm going to hand it to you. I'm going to fill out a second form. This is my view of you. This is what I expect you to do, with what priority, and what tasks will be done cooperatively with me. And then I'm going to fill out in the white space there what I think your roles, responsibilities, and accountabilities are. You're going to do 2 pieces of paper. Your view of you, your view of me. And then we're going to sit down and we're going to compare. And you'll be fascinated to find out where we agree and where we don't. And by the way, what we're really doing is we're avoiding the conflict before it ever starts. If you and I see little differences, we'll be able to resolve them. If we see big differences that we can't resolve, I shouldn't get mad at you, you shouldn't get mad at me. Let's go talk to the big boss. That's why they make the money, right? That's why they make the big bucks up there. It's time to bring them into the equation, to let them resolve the situation so that you and I minimize the conflict between us in the functional pair. Believe me, all of the forgiveness in your soul you're going to need, because I'm not the easiest guy to work with. I want to save all that forgiveness for when I really need it. If I can get somebody else to solve a problem between the two of us, I'm going to get somebody else to do it. Now, let's talk about the next tool, and this is a very interesting one. Institutionalizing trust into the relationship. Here's the issue. For those of you who read up on alliances, you'll know that every single book, article on alliances says the same thing. You have to have trust in the relationship. And then they walk away. Wonderful. How do you create trust in a relationship? You ever think about that? Well, I do. So, I work at Rutgers University. I can go to any department and ask any dumb question I want. Where do you think I went? Back to the psychology department. The question is, what is trust? Which is a very interesting question. And let me share with you what we know. When one person grants the other trust, a calculus goes on in the mind. The person granting trusts evaluates the other along 4 dimensions. Competence. Does Slowinski know what he's supposed to know? Reliability. Does Slowinski deliver what he's supposed to deliver when he's supposed to deliver it? Honesty. Do I tell you everything, or do I only tell you the things I want you to know? And then finally, caring. Caring is a very interesting component of the trust equation. How do I show you I care for you in an organizational setting? And in reality, in alliances, I have to fly air cover for you. I have to protect you while you're in my organization. You may be the senior vice president of everything inside your company. You cross that organizational boundary, walk into my company, and you're just Harry. I mean, who's Harry? I don't know. He's throwing his weight around. Don't listen to him. They don't care. I have to protect you when you're in my organization, and that's really what I mean by caring. Now, I haven't run this study, but I intend to someday. If great alliance managers show that caring is one of the characteristics that they have, and they're protecting you while you're in their organization, what is the career path of great alliance managers? Where'd they go? Slowinski, who do you work for? Us or them? See, that's the career path of a great alliance manager. There are risks you have to take. I must protect you while you're in my organization. So, now let's talk about functional workshops. Real work must be done during this 2-day session, and the functional workshops are the best place to get it done. So let me share with you some thoughts about functional workshops. You're going to know the ones you need. I'm not going to dictate a smart group of people like you what workshops you need, but just let me share with you some examples so that you have a sense for some things I want to make sure you cover. One of them is the Inter-Alliance Operations Workshop. I would like the people who are going to be responsible for coordinating and integrating the relationships to discuss the alliance governance structure, the formal and informal technology transfer processes, day-to-day working processes. How are we going to work together? Conflict resolution and escalation processes. Compatibility issues such as quality, financial reporting, information technology, and personnel assignments and policies. You know, these very nutsy, boltsy management things can really get in the way. There is a wonderful article by Tom Finn and Dave McCamey talking about Procter & Gamble's relationship with Sanofi Aventis on Actonel. And as that alliance started, some of the earlier days of email firewalls. And so every time someone from Procter & Gamble would send an email over to their Sanofi Aventis counterpart, it got blocked. And it didn't take long for people on the Procter & Gamble side to become frustrated and people on the Sanofi Aventis side to become frustrated because we weren't getting information. They're not answering our questions. I need this information. And so even things as funny as firewalls, spend some time thinking through what the blocking and tackling, the physical infrastructure of the organizations are like so that you ensure that you minimize that kind of conflict. So, what I want to do now is I want to talk about dinner. Do I care about dinner? Not really, no. What I really want is I want an opportunity to do some pretty powerful team building. There are good ways to do team building, and there are not such good ways to do team building. I'm going to start with the not such good ways. A dinner at a restaurant with these long tables. You can talk to the guy next to you or the woman across the way, but it's very narrowly confined, the set of people that you can talk to. And therefore, I'm not a big fan of that kind of dinner. Another miserable way to do team building is, let's go play golf. Well, I can't play golf, and I don't want you to look at me while I'm looking like a jerk around the golf course, tearing up the turf and not hitting the ball at all. So golf is something I don't recommend unless you know that everybody is good at golf. In that case, golf's a great idea. Now, what do I like in terms of team building at dinner? Bowling. That's right. We're all going to the bowling alley. Why? Well, first of all, we all look dumb in those rented shoes. Secondly, you can bowl with a beer in your hand, which is a very important thing. And finally, the way we're going to team up individuals is our secret for team building. This is not going to be bowling company A against company B. No, 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 no. The teams are going to be the functional pairs. Myself, a technical person, and my counterpart in the other organization, we're going to be a pair. And we're going to bowl against the marketing person from the other company and the marketing person in my company because they're going to be a functional pair. So what we're going to do is we are going to make teams of people based on the knowledge of our functional pairs, and all I can tell you is by the end of the night, your alliance will be off and running. It's a wonderful way, it's an absolutely wonderful way to have people get to know each other in a very informal setting and have a lot of fun at the same time. So, okay, we're done with dinner. We had a great time bowling. What I want to do now is I want to talk about day 2. What do we do in day 2? Day 2 is really focused on functional workshops. There's a lot of work that has to be done. Day 2 will be focused on that. But I want to encourage you to make sure that the functional workshops result in these outputs. We're looking for action plans and action items assigned to individuals. Agreed objectives and milestones, identification of responsible managers, and any unresolved issues, disagreements, obstacles, potential solutions. The functional workshops are an opportunity for us to minimize conflict because we're going to address the hard parts of the working relationship between us, and anything that is unresolved is brought to the management team. Remember, I'm a big believer in using the management team to resolve problems that you and I didn't create. If we didn't create them, we shouldn't be resolving them. I'm also going to encourage you on the second day, towards the end of the second day, to have a communications workshop. You know, you've heard these words, communicate, 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 and it's all true. It's a little trite, but it's all true. The rest of the truth is that when you're crossing an organizational boundary, communication becomes even more difficult. If you don't learn anything from this set of webcasts, learn this. Conflict occurs at the boundaries of organizations. It occurs at the external boundary between you and your partner, and internally, conflict occurs at the boundaries of internal organizations. Marketing, R&D, legal. Boundaries are a real problem for communication, and it's one of the reasons that conflict is so strong at that point. So what we're going to try and do, we're going to try and minimize it. I want to establish links to all the internal and external stakeholders. Who needs to be kept informed of what we're doing inside my company, inside your company? You need to be ensured that I am working inside my company to keep those internal stakeholders engaged. I want to explain the long-term and the immediate impact of what we're doing to those stakeholders. That's really what they want to know and how it impacts them. It also is important to engage those stakeholders when they have a budgetable resource that is required by the relationship. I want to make sure that when that budgetable resource is needed, it's available. I really want to make sure when that key person is needed from that functional group, he or she is available. So those are the discussions we're having with the internal stakeholders. The other interesting thing is that the communication structure must be viewed by the stakeholders as reliable, consistent, and it works well in the steady state. This is not a one-time visit to my stakeholders. This is a visit that occurs on a regular basis. They know that it's coming, and it may be at their staff meeting. That's probably the best way to do it, but you're going to know when you see your own partner's internal structure. You'll be able to decide what's the best way for your partner to communicate to that stakeholder, and in some instances, you may be invited as well. So, the output is a communications plan. Following that, the end of the day is there's workshop readouts. Everybody should know everything that's going on. There's next steps on how to resolve unresolved issues, and then finally you'll adjourn. We've covered the kickoff meeting. We've covered that 2-day and the agenda for the 2-day meeting. But what I'd like to do now is share with you some thoughts on other moments of time where you can make a management intervention in an alliance and not be seen as a burden on hardworking people. And that's at the quarterly meetings. So, the quarterly meetings usually have key internal committees, and they talk about the budgeting process. Here are some other things that I'd like you to think about at these quarterly meetings. Review the action items. How are we doing? Prepare for key committees. Who's the key committee in your company? I'm going to tell you the key committee in my company, and I'm going to tell you what we need to get ready for that key committee. Budget review. How are we doing on the money? Where did we go over? Where did we go under? What's the solution? New member orientation and expectation mapping. When a new member comes into the relationship, either a new person from my side or a new person from your side, this is the time to take out the expectation mapping worksheets again. What we're trying to do is we're trying to reform the functional pair. If a new member's coming in, it likely means that an old member left. Well, the remaining member doesn't have a pair anymore. When the new person comes in, expectation mapping worksheets are a wonderful way to orient the new person both to the alliance itself and to his or her counterpart in the other company. The Interfirm Trust Tool. It helps to remind everybody about the 4 dimensions of the Interfirm Trust Tool: competence, reliability, honesty, caring. And then finally, I want to introduce you to a concept called breakdown sessions. Pilot breakdown sessions on your next deal, and you'll find them very powerful, and I predict you'll use them going on in this relationship and on your other relationships as well. What is a breakdown session? Key members of Company A's team sit down with key members of Company B's team, and they predict what are the likely issues that will cause friction between us during the next quarter. You will be amazed at how accurately they are able to predict management issues that are likely to cause friction. And this is the time to start creating solutions. If we can't create the solution, this is the time to bring in the management team to say, ladies and gentlemen, we've identified this likely friction point, and we'd like your opinion on how to resolve it. Those breakdown sessions are really very powerful. By the way, the first time you do it, everybody will hate it. It's like going to the dentist. Like it doesn't feel good. But after they see the results, the next time you have a quarterly meeting, people will not leave until they've had the opportunity to have their breakdown session. It takes about 30 minutes. This is not a burden, and it is a very powerful conflict resolution tool. And finally, the thing I'd like to talk about is site visits. This depends a lot on your alliance. Some people hire third parties to come in and be a non-affiliated third party. I don't represent Company A, I don't represent Company B, I represent the goals and objectives of the relationship. Some people do that. And if the alliance is that important to you, I recommend that. Sometimes people don't have the resources to do that sort of thing. In that case, I would encourage you to go visit your partner on a regular basis. Physically go to their site. Ask questions. Have lunch with folks. Sit down. Make yourself available. Alliances are a body contact sport. To the extent that you are physically available to your partner, it really helps resolve a lot of things that probably are not well resolved over the phone and certainly not resolved over email. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the Alliance Implementation Program. I strongly encourage you to pilot these tools. If you want a further discussion of the tools, you'll find it in the strongest link. That's the book, and there's a link to that book on this website.